Right, so I'm really delighted to welcome Natasha here to talk. Natasha's obviously got work in this exhibition at the moment here, and she's here to talk about her wider practice. I will talk about that piece as well. I've kind of known her work for a long time, because when I was a student, I saw that piece of work, and it kind of really stood out at the time. So I'm really kind of interested to hear about this whole kind of journey from there onwards. So it's kind of quite, yeah, when I saw that, I went, oh God, yes, that's funny, that's the first image, because that took me quite a long time, and I studied quite a long time ago. So anyway, Natasha's here to talk about work very well. And there'll be time to ask questions at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. So this is my work on the left-hand side, and actually it's worth just telling you that it's obviously not active. And this is the first time I've seen it in a kind of non-active state, but in the gallery before here. So this is the third venue of a touring show. This piece was actually actively making these paintings in the space. So what you're seeing is a kind of like a record of its performance, but in the gallery in Bournemouth. But we'll talk a bit more about that, or hopefully I'll talk a bit more about that as the kind of talk goes on. Okay, I'm at a kind of slightly strange point when it comes to talking about my work, because I'm currently doing a PhD. And the PhD question is called, the PhD question is exposing themselves, machines that make art. And then I was thinking on the train here, it's probably more aptly should be called exposing myself. Because what the PhD is doing is it's making me, I guess it's not dissimilar from any kind of course of research or study, but it's making me kind of question every single word that I kind of wrap around my work. Now that's, I think as a tutor and as a student, it's really healthy to question the language that you wrap around your practice, but it's also incredibly unnerving. So, and as Andrew just suggested, I've been making painting machines since my MA at the Slade. And so I've wrapped a language around this practice for a very long time. And it's therefore quite unnerving to start to kind of unpick that language and ask questions and test it. So it's quite an uncertain point in my practice, I guess. So when I was asked to talk, I thought, God, I don't quite know how I talk about this work anymore. Then I thought, okay, I'm going to do this two-way. I'm going to do the talk in two parts. Hopefully that's a more generous way to do it. So I am going to, in the first instance, talk about, give you an overview of my practice since the Slade, since the show since New Contemporaries. This was a New Contemporaries, the first painting machine. And I'm going to map out its history, and I am going to cling to the language that I've used to describe it for all these years. And then in the second half of the talk, I'm going to show you some images of my studio, where I'm doing my PhD at the Ruskin. It's a practice-led PhD. I've got a studio. My studio's in Chaos. And it's and I just wanted to show you some images of some of the kind of more uncertain things that are going on in the studio, and then to pose a series of questions to the work. So to be honest about the uncertainties. So wrap the work in the language I know, and then hopefully unravel it. And maybe at that point, it will turn into less of a kind of presentation, which this feels a bit like formal, and more into a space of dialogue where you might be able to help me out a bit. So bear with me, the first bit might be kind of me talking at you, and then hopefully the second bit might be me just opening up some questions and you showing you some more uncertain things, and then we could talk. Does that make sense? Okay. And hopefully I'm not going to read, but it just kind of helps a bit. I'd probably shout at my students for reading, but fortunately you can't shout at me. Okay, so I make painting machines, and I've made them since I was a postgraduate at the Slade. And maybe I should be honest about how they came about. I was dipping paintings manually by hand, lowering them into vats of paint and pulling them out, lowering them into vats of paint, pulling them out, doing it repetitively, and then presenting the paintings static on the wall. And I was kind of dissatisfied by the static nature of the paintings. So, situated within an extended language of painting, my works continually involved the production. The last 10 years have involved the production of kind of painting machines, question mark, systems that paint. It's just going to keep going dead, isn't it? Okay. So what you can see here is a machine that is kind of powering a painting, that's a bit of an overstatement, painting in and out of a vat of emulsion paint, and it's doing it on a timer. They're very archaic kind of mechanical devices. They're not sophisticated in any way. They're getting slightly more sophisticated, but this is not a sophisticated kind of mechanical device. But they were born out of a desire to make visible the process of painting so that the viewer could be directly in the site of production, which is kind of ironic because ideally this thing next to you would be flooding itself, inflating with paint, pouring paint over the surface, and you would be, as the audience, directly in the kind of site of the painting's production, but you're not. You're kind of with its kind of record of its performance. There's been 5 painting machines. Did you see them at Holdsworth? Or did you just see that one?
I saw it in contemporaries.
Okay.
I saw Larry.
Oh, okay. God. There's been 5 painting machines, and they continually dip a canvas into a vat of white emulsion paint. They operate on a timer. The machine plunges the canvas. You've just seen it work. You go, you can get, I can do that fast, and then you, again, I do what it does. And they operate on a time, and the machine plunges the painting into the paint, and then, so there's a kind of illusion towards mass production. Of course, the painting machines don't mass produce anything. They never make the same painting twice. What I'm excited by, intrigued by, is the event in the work. And the performance, or the kind of live, the witnessing live. So it feels slightly strange to be next to this kind of dead work. Half of me wondered whether I could have come and resuscitated it.
Because they said it's all part of
it is, and I don't think of them as failed or kind of seized. I mean, they're seized, but I don't think of them as failed when they've stopped. And in fact, the article in Garageland talks about that kind of, it's not failed when it's not working. It is just in another state of being. So it's quite nice to actually see it as it is, but it's also quite interesting to resuscitate it. So in all the work, potential, we just talked about potential a bit, didn't we, is critical. They've got a past, so this one's definitely got a past, a present, and a future. So this could be kind of brought back to life. The viewer will encounter something that's in a constant state of incompletion. And in theory, this is still in a constant state of incompletion because it can be refilled. There's a constant dissatisfaction with presenting something fixed in time or static, and there's still that constant dissatisfaction. So this was at Holdsworth. It was the 3rd machine. There's a couple of machines not included in this because it's quite a short presentation. But and this canvas that you can see on here is tiny, and it's a wall-mounted machine. So no matter how rigorously designed the systems or machines are, they become something that can never be fully anticipated. So this is quite an interesting That's at the collection. So this machine was at your museum, and it was a show that had been curated by Ed Allington. There's a really funny story connected to this, because Ed had taught me at the Slade, and he asked me to be in this show. I was really excited. I came up, installed the machine next to You and You Glow, and he taught at the Slade, and he was like, and a lot of people that had kind of taught me at the Slade, installed it and everything. Kate was going to drive home and come back for the private view. One day before the private view, Ed phoned me and said, something terrible has happened. And I'd used a panel of MDF instead of ply. I don't know what had come over me. And because these things are constantly dipped in paint, in and out of paint, MDF swells in moisture, whereas ply is used in boat building, so it's completely unaffected by moisture. So when I came, luckily, it had done it before the private view, and the whole of the front of the painting had kind of peeled away, and I had to reinstall the panel and kind of rescued it for the private view. But it was a complete cock-up on my... It's interesting because I follow rules very, very rigorously, because I'm interested in this kind of rule, kind of setting thing. Anyway, this painting ran at the collection in your museum for 3 months, and I never saw it until the last day when I took it off. So the curator would phone and I'd say, what's it like? And she'd say, the stalactites are really delicate. And then by the time I got here after 3 months, it was these were like udders. And in fact, the gallery kept that painting, so I don't know where it is. Anyway, so
is it switched off at night?
yeah.
So they kind of form.
Yeah, so really what you're seeing, the reason why it's kind of, the lines occur on the front is because there's an evaporation in the paint. It's not going in at a different level. It's literally going in the same level all the time, but it's the paint in the vat is evaporating. So you're getting this kind of build-up of stalactites and timelines. So no matter how rigorously designed the systems or machines are, they can become something that can never be fully anticipated. So more and more I'm interested in this dialogue with, stress or pleasure, anxiety, kind of as the paint drips or pours or spills out into the space, literally filling the site with the sound, smell and substance of paint. And you can see that, when this has been active in Bournemouth, they're not particularly well contained. They don't behave themselves completely. And I think I'm interested a bit in that kind of misbehaviour, my paintings, machines. Okay, so this was in Nottingham. So other work, like the Lowry work, has used the structural practicalities of domestic plumbing to pump paint around the space. And this was the first testing ground for that. And actually, I'm not being very honest here, because this really literally did spill into the space. So what was happening here was paint was being pumped through kind of a system of plumbing to series of taps that were kind of pouring paint onto panels and then collecting in troughs below and kind of moving the paint back. 25 gallons of paint literally poured all over the gallery floor. And my husband and I were kind of with our jeans rolled up with kind of mops, But this gallery were quite interested, they were quite kind of keen on taking a risk with this new work, so I could test out what the possibilities for this might be. So titled with references to the systems they derive from, so like rising main, overflow, flow and return are all kind of plumbing or like house domestic. They're all kind of household, domestic plumbing terms. Quite like that, quite like kind of clinging to the terminology of the systems I'm using. The plumbing works are really rigorously designed, but in their realisation are constantly changing. So this was a domestic pumping paint through it. 4 of them failed. I kept buying new pumps because domestic water pumps, they're using a kind of like a device that goes like this, and the pumps were seizing because it couldn't cope with the paint. This is the new pump. This is a much more sophisticated form of pump. It's a peristaltic pump, so the paint never touches the mechanism because it's squeezed through a tube. So they do get more sophisticated, and I guess once they get too sophisticated, I lose interest in them, and then I move on. Okay. So flow and return at the Lowry. I bet you didn't see it active though. I had a complete nightmare with this. Someone made the paint for me. I had the paint made to see if I could keep the paint more fluid it was meant to run for 6 months. Ran for about 6 days now. Like, literally not very long at all. So the interesting thing about the kind of sophistication is, and I've got these on a different slideshow, is that, so I go from somewhere like Bonington who are willing to take these kind of risks, and then I get asked this commission for the Lowry. It's a big show, and there can be fewer risks taken in terms of like paint spillage. So I work with these engineers to build panels that have got inbuilt reservoirs in them. So what's happening here is that you're witnessing 25 gallons, or hopefully you are, of paint run into this supply pipe, into these two panels that are literally, they're about they're nearly 2 meters wide each. And then paint is coming out of machine cut holes in the surface of the aluminium, running down the front and collecting in these reservoirs to flow back. As Andrew will tell you, what happened was the piece seized quite quickly. That's what it should look like. But I'm interested in that kind of idea of, I don't see them as failed. I mean, they are just something different, and they're kind of unexpected. I'm kind of interested in that dialogue I have with him. So for flow and return at the Lowry, a new system was designed that fed paint through a system of copper pipes to hidden reservoirs. So in here, but just below this line, there is a reservoir, internal reservoir, and what's happening is it's filling with paint, and then it's bleeding over the top, and it's operating on a timer, so it's stopping and starting and stopping and starting, similarly to this. As the reservoir fills, the paint overflows through holes cut in the aluminium surface. Any residual paint is collected, or at least it should be, collected in the tank, in the kind of little reservoirs below, and fed back to a tank. This is, and this was one of those moments where that kind of anxiety around a piece. I slept the night on the floor at the Lowry on some foam because I literally, we filled the system, and there was a moment of like absolute kind of celebration. I'd never seen it work. It flowed through, it did everything I wanted it to do. I mean, one of the things I'm always really honest about is I build them with my dad, and I still build them with him. And I'm standing at the Lowry, and the curator's there, and we watch it fill for the first time, and it's like, yeah, this is absolutely the most brilliant moment. And then the next minute, I just tell my dad to go, turn it off, turn it off. And basically, the reservoirs at the bottom of the panels weren't feeding the paint back quick enough to the tank, so we were just at risk of like a massive flood of paint. So we had to stop the system and overnight re-plumb in this return pipe so that the tank was closer to the panels. And then the day before the private view, I was so anxious about leaving it that I asked the curator, could I sleep next to it? And I do have quite a strange relationship with them, I think. So any residual paint it collects in this trough, hopefully, and feeds back to a tank to start the journey again. This is the seized painting at the Lowry. So what starts to happen is the paint slightly discolours because of the copper. So there's a kind of, the material has a kind of a voice, potentially. And so do the audience. When I got to the Lowry to collect the panels, someone had peeled off like one of the stalactites. Yeah, people do touch them a lot. What we just talked about. People are very tempted by them and tend to want to touch them. So, which is quite interesting if you think how much removal of hands is playing a part in them. Okay. So for a sustained and variable period of time, the work is live and unpredictable, but it's in this volatility that I guess my fascination lies. Okay. This is the Celeste Painting Prize, which is an interesting prize if you're a painter. It still exists. It was the curatorial, it was something to do with the curatorial team at Goldsmiths. They select a number of artists, and then the artists that are selected all select a single artist for an overall prize. Quite a significant financial kind of, and it was a really great opportunity for me to make new work. But so if you're interested in those types of kind of, well, those are always the things to keep an eye out on. Because if you're one of the people, if you win it, then it enables the next work to be produced, and they're expensive works to make. So, but again, you can see that the kind of work's getting more sophisticated, and the copper. It's funny because I'm having a kind of conversation with myself about the relevance of the copper, but the copper plays quite an important part. Like, I think of it like drawing almost. And when I install them, I don't touch the copper with my hands because I don't want them to discolour. So I'm kind of interested in, I don't see, although this may be the thing that kind of is beginning to unravel, I don't see the copper as servicing the painting. Like, I see them all as integral, which is maybe where the question arises around whether these are machines that make paintings, what I call them. Okay.
So did you get invited, or did you invite someone? Did you say about the prizes?
Yeah, so basically what happens is, it's interesting, it'll be interesting to know how it works now. So you submit a proposal, then everybody showed, so the Goldsmiths curatorial department select the artists, and there's a big show of of these selected artists. And then all of the selected artists make a vote for the one winner. And you win £10,000. And actually, I did win. So, so that piece paid for itself. It was like, what? I thought my life had changed, but then I realised 10 grand actually does feel like a lot of money at the time. But when you make work like this, it's incredibly expensive, and more expensive now because copper. It used to be really cheap. Now copper's like incredibly. So now the Lowry piece has been melted down. So it's got it's quite interesting. Okay, so this is a show called Interior Life. It was Arts Council funded. It was a group exhibition, and I made a new work. And they're really small kind of subtle changes, but actually what I was interested here was introducing a relationship with the wall again. So no longer kind of metal, aluminium panels, but the panel was constructed from ply, kind of reminiscent of the gallery wall itself. I suppose what I was interested in is this idea that the gallery wall might bleed paint, or that I could get that panel as close to the wall as I could. Not close enough, I don't think. And hidden inside the panel again was a reservoir. Someone wrote about this piece, and they put the panels in Natasha's work are animated by paint that flows down their front and is then pumped away, only to be returned by a plumbing system. Using materials conventionally used in the construction of interiors, it could be said this work echoes the wall it's placed on. The panels, however, are in constant movement. Well, and this one did stay in constant movement, unlike a static wall. Donzelman, who wrote about it, goes on to say that the surface of the painting is both here and not here in the same moment. The work's in constant motion and literally plugged into a system that extends beyond the conventional picture frame, literally wrapping itself around the corner of the gallery. So, they've always got quite kind of particular relationship, maybe not this one, but to the space that they're in. So the Lowry was a real sense that it was kind of wrapped around the space, and this took it up the corner. So and also guttering, a new obsession. This is a lesson to be learned for all of you, because my images are too big, I think. Or sometimes my computer doesn't cope with it. So you can see how live the surface of the painting is. Okay. Is it just slowed down, my computer? It's like the Wheel of Doom. The Wheel of Doom. It's not normally this bad, actually. I know, look. Oh no, come on. It might be jammed.
Sometimes it will escape and then go back in.
Oh, there you go. Why is it? Okay. So I might just press it on. Well, it's still got the Wheel of Doom there, isn't it? Okay, for Mob Remedies, this was a show. In the East End that included George Barber's. Have you ever seen his film Automotive Action Painting? And Lothar Goetz. You know Lothar Goetz's work. They're his painted walls. And a cast work by Pierce Secunda. I wonder whether okay. A new work was constructed specifically for the space. But for the first time ever, I didn't have a panel. So I've kind of taken out what I was doing was kind of testing whether I needed the spectacle of the panel. So the work, which is a 38-metre line of copper pipe, was literally a line of copper pipe that was plumbed around the space and pumped paint on an endless journey kind of around the space in a gallery. So it went above other people's work, kind of over the top of Lothar's work, kind of filled and simply pumped it. And what was really interesting about it was that with a powerful pump in one room, paint was forced through a system of copper pipes, only to find its way back to a holding tank where it was briefly contained before it started its journey again. And it, in a way, like it's interesting because in removing something from I think what's good as an artist is to test out what's absolutely necessary, and you do that. It's a bit like making a cake, you know, like you do that by taking out certain bits of the ingredients to just see whether the whole thing collapses or not. And it was interesting to take out what I'd relied on for so long, which was the kind of spectacle of the dripping kind of, panel. And to really pay attention to, we talked in the tutorials a bit about paying attention. And that's enabled me the possibility of paying attention to some other parts of the work, like the sound and, and the tank itself. Okay.
So did you decide after doing was it this essential thing?
Well, they reappear. But the rhythm of the pump, I still, maybe I've not paid enough attention to those things, actually. The rhythm of the pump's really lovely when it's moving, and, and that kind of, the way the paint moves into the tank, and so I was kind of pleased with that work, but I guess something else happened. So it's the panel has re-emerged, but in another way, I guess. So I'm going to press this forward while I talk. These are images of the trials of a series of inflate paintings that were commissioned by Camden Art Centre, which is a kind of version of what this is, although at Camden they were hand pumped. This has been mechanically pumped. This was for a residency called In With the New. It wasn't a very long residency. So it's critical to acknowledge, I wanted to say something about this. I might read this bit because it's quite nice. It's critical to acknowledge that a space for dialogue and collaboration is central in all the work. So I don't make these on my own. I make them with my dad, or with an engineer, or with a kind of pump. I've always got someone I'm talking to about I'm never the expert. There's always an expert. And I'm interested in that dialogue, and I'm interested in what that dialogue does to the work. So I say something like, I want the canvas to act like a container. I want to make a painting that fills up from the inside. I want the paint that makes the painting to be held inside the belly of the painting. And someone says, are you completely mad? And there's no way we can do that, but we can do this. And I'll say, no, I really want to do this. So there's a technician at Bath where I teach who knows everything there is to know about paint, everything. And with him, we worked out a way that we could make paintings that could contain paint and inflate with paint and kind of move paint through them. My computer has gone utterly mad now, because now I can't even find the cursor.
Just try escaping.
Do you reckon? Okay. How do I? Yeah, except it's not going to escape, look. It's completely frozen. I'm going to turn off my computer and turn it on again.
So it says
oh no! Ah. Now it's going to turn off. I knew it was going to do that. Sorry. Yeah, okay. No, shall I say restart?
Is there like a bladder inside?
Yeah, so this is, so actually, I mean, what you can see, actually, you know what, I might not even show you those last slides, because what you can see is the paintings themselves. So they're a double thickness. So let me show you, tell you. So there was a series of 8 inflate paintings, and they were next to an Eva Hesse show. So there was a really interesting juxtaposition between, making work for a show that was alongside someone like Eva Hesse. They were identical. 8 canvases were positioned at intervals around the space, and using a pump turned by the viewer. You could see the orange pump in the paint was moved from a tank through a cannon. So basically I'm going to move over here. So basically they were hand pumped, but what you see is that paint's moved into the belly of these paintings, and these are double thickness. So you've got one canvas and then you've got another stretched over the top, and then they're getting and they inflate with paint, and paint pours over the surface. So it's impossible to deny the relationship with the body, I guess. They're filled up and emptied out almost simultaneously, and they're like bellies. So they've become a container or a skin. And I'm interested in, I suppose, that contradiction, that kind of, the body's denied through the machine, and then and repetition, yet acknowledged through fluid kind of form and pace. My computer's gone completely bonkers. And when they're stopped, the paintings are like memories of their own performances, which is, I guess, kind of what you're seeing now. Have you got any questions? Come on, ask me a question. That will get me out of this technical mishap. Go on.
Is there a particular reason why you're always using white paint and not colour?
Good question. Yes, because, I'd like to think, because I'm terrified of colour, no, that's one answer, and I can't rationalise why colour would make sense, I guess, and I'm interested in I'm interested in paint as a material, not as a I'm not interested in the illusion. I'm not interested in illusion, I'm interested in the material of paint. And in a sense, it feels like white relieves me of any it's the colour that kind of allows me to be involved in the kind of material of paint. Without the kind of reference, although of course there are other references like rhyme and minimalism and Does that answer that question? What, anyone else?
What made you so interested in using sort of like automated things rather than doing sort of like sheets and things like that?
No. I mean, like I mean, in a sense, my history might be more like, you know, having a dad that built things. Like, I mean, not like, I mean, or, you know, like, it's probably more likely DIY books than it is, you know, like Reader's Digest DIY plumbing diagrams, or like, you know, a dad that was more interested in kind of going, well, should we do this, and how do we do this, and then looking at, in fact, I've got really, really interested lately in car manuals, because like, you know, the old British Leyland car manuals, and like, so no, I don't, you know, I don't come from a kind of history of, you know, and like I said, I'm not really an expert. I don't, you know, I rely on other people to make these happen with me, and I'm interested in what that conversation does. Like, so, you know, the guys, it was in Doncaster that built the Lowry pieces, and I ended up in a field in the middle of Doncaster with like guys that make skateboard ramps, and filling, you know, like trying to fill like troughs with paint to see if I can get an even. So I'm endlessly in these kind of situations where I'm trying to make things work with people that can help me do that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely.
What did that kind of shift up, bringing people directly?
Pace, like a really, I mean, you didn't see them completely, and I'm not going to take a chance on, but like the human being pace is really problematic. So mostly blokes kind of come up going, oh, like this, like, you know, like, and the paint would be like spewing all over the place. And then you'd get, and there's a real gender difference, like, or you'd get like tentative kind of like, and then the painting wouldn't fill quick enough. I love the pace of the machine, the rhythm of the machine, and I love that I like that I can turn them on and then go, and that I've set the pace. I've got really comfortable with that pace, and kind of, and then I leave, and then it does whatever it does. But it's been from its kind of switch on, I've controlled it to that point, and then I go like this. So, but the pace of the audience was really problematic. Although, you know, they were beautiful pumps, like 1970s petrol siphoning pumps. They were really beautiful, and it did do something. You know, it did. And I am really interested in the audience being part of the kind of in the site of production, but I'm not sure I'm interested in them actually.
So was that one of those things that should be something out of like the panels?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talked in the tutorials today, I think it's our job to test out all the possibilities, isn't it? I mean, you've got to test out what it is to allow the audience to engage, and you've got to test out and then take, you know, like, I mean, maybe, you know, I feel like I'm right back in the centre of testing all of these things out again, like asking questions about whether are they painting machines, and so this is back now to where I'm at, I suppose. I really like this. My friend was in my studio, and she said that my paintings were like, the machines were like drunk men at parties, because they like might puke on you, or like, but you really want to hang out with them because they're kind of cool, and then, but they're a bit unpredictable. And then so I thought that was quite an interesting, and then I've put these in because I write instructions to myself to make my work, and I wanted, to be honest about that. So at the moment I'm trying to make paintings that dissolve. I'm trying to make paintings that constantly make themselves, and I'm trying to make paintings that are made from paint. So what you'll see is that I'm trying to make skins of paint that can contain wet paint. You'll see bits of them in my studio now. So I've got lots of questions. Do I make painting machines? Are they in fact machines that make art? Do the pipes simply service the painting or the object being made? Because they're more important than that. Do the machines expose a kind of production to the audience? And what is it to expose that production? What are you learning something more? are they really revealing production? Am I kind of using that as a kind of protection? So these are bags of paint, holding paint. We were talking about, who was it that I did a tutorial with this morning? Oh yeah, so this is me asking questions in the studio with words. I'm really interested in the space of not knowing in the studio and whether these objects are objects that continue to not know. And there's a beautiful new book by Rebecca Fortnum called Not Knowing. It's a really, really easy read, so you should get it. Oh, did you? It's a beautiful book, isn't it? Well, Ian Keir wrote something in it, didn't he? And he's at the Henry Moore. So the machine is produced in the studio and produces beyond the studio. So does it move from being produced to producing, and what does that mean? These are bags filled with paint in my studio. So Fortnum, in her book Not Knowing How Artists Think, talks about the studio as a space of knowing and not knowing, of toing and froing. And I wonder whether these are objects that kind of don't know. What? Say that again. He helped me build that, actually. Yeah. I mean, I can plumb them in myself now, so it's nearly redundant. But I love the conversations that we'll have about them. And I love the conversations around plumbing. I love talking about elbow joints and compression fittings, and I love DIY shops. And I love that they're made from paper and they are potentially going to collapse at any minute. And then I wonder how much I talk about not fully anticipating these things, but actually how far do I not know how these behave? And do I need to start making work that really misbehaves, more? And then this is the latest thing. So this is learning to program. I wonder how much what do I actually know? I'm always interested in this kind of knowing and not knowing. And at the moment, I'm trying to make paintings that will kind of think for themselves, maybe. So they'll fill with paint, there'll be a drip, and the sensor, which I'm kind of playing with in the studio, will sense the drip. So actually the sensors are just below the table, and this is me testing them out. And the sensor will sense a drip has happened, and it will switch off a pump. So I'm making the pumps myself. I'm programming these little Arduinos. So basically what will happen is you'll be able to make a painting like this. It'll be able to pump paint through it. It'll be able to say, I've just seen a drip, and turn itself off. And then so it won't rely on a timer at all. It will kind of it'll have its own kind of mechanism for kind of working itself. That's the idea, anyway. These are just things that I have hanging around my studio. I thought it was kind of interesting to see how this is to do with, I included this because I think it's really interesting in relation to paying attention. So I just took a friend to my studio and we talked about the piece on the wall. And she said, what's this on the floor? And it was like a test. And she was really excited by it. And I just thought that's kind of interesting because I think in a studio, you're often walking past the bits that you should be paying attention to. It's always a useful thing to know. And then this is me starting to figure out whether I can make the paintings out of skins of paint and fill them. So that's made from paint. And I'm kind of interested in how the construction of the panel itself is revealed. But these are tiny tests, and then it failed, and that's what happened. I suppose I wanted to kind of say and that's a skin. So in the site of the encounter, do the machines attempt to escape a form that signifies a completion of thought? Am I trying to kind of position the viewer in a place with a work that isn't actually kind of utterly known? And I think I'm kind of more interested in growing kind of more and more interested in that. Anyway, that's it. Sorry about the technical hitch. And I'm happy to answer as many questions as you've got to throw at me, or for you to go.
I want to ask you if this is picking up a little bit that control when you said about really back control. It does feel like you've got complete control over them, even though the lights not working.
Yeah.
The control is kind of managed. And, yeah, how much would you actually want it to get out of control?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'm kind of, they're really, really managed. I mean, they're really managed, you know, they're like, I really manage the way that they're installed. I pay really particular attention to the kind of, to the way that they're kind of, you know, to the rules that kind of you know, like plumbing has its kind of own rules, you know, it has to supply, it needs valves, you know, I love those rules, I really love them. I don't know how much I mean, there is something kind of unexpected about, I guess, but there is a moment of knowing to them too well. I do get to know them too well, and I wonder whether these paper things or these, the Arduino to kind of the programming is me trying to kind of like give them another, kind of go a step further. But yeah, that's, you know, I think you can wrap a language around your work, and like then you can go, do I really not know them? Like, and then you have to go, okay, I mean, we talked about it in tutorial, then do you have to address that, or then let it go from that kind of language? I mean, literally didn't know that this wasn't, running paint through it. And, you know, I'm getting more and more intrigued by the instructions I send, and I'm also getting more and more intrigued by, like, the kind of anxiety of not like what it might be to hand over the install, and like, so maybe I'm tentatively distant, you know, kind of taking a step back. And also don't even know how to use my own Mac. So.
And I guess why was, I guess that kind of like, is it intuitive in the studio? Is it, well, I guess not intuitive, but do you feel like actually you drawn before?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I've got another kind of PowerPoint that I give that's longer. That's like a, you know, where the, I mean, I try to look for rules in other, you know, I've talked about the rules of plumbing, and sometimes I wonder whether like a work resolves when I make it. The way a work resolves in the studio is when it is working, and I don't mean like working, I don't mean simply working conceptually or visually, I mean literally working. So like my challenge at the moment in the studio is make a skin of paint, hold a paint, and pump paint through a pump I'm making, and pick up the drip. So I've got like an agenda, and like, there are loads of places to get, and then that work will work and will be released into the world, I guess, at the point where I go, it works. And it might be that I'm kind of releasing myself from kind of aesthetic, although there are lots of aesthetic kind of considerations that are being made. But yeah, I like to deal with kind of, and that's why I'm so fascinated by the notion of instruction, I think, and the manual, like the car manual or something, like, and then, so, you know, it'll work if you do these things to it, and then it works, and then you let it into the world, and then it does the kind of poetry is beyond me, I guess, if there's not that I want to, you know, yeah, I guess that's, yeah. Thank you, everybody.